AutoCAD 2011 utilizing dimension variables with paper space and model space. We're going to start by entering our data in model space, knowing that we will eventually migrate over to the paper space tabs to show you the functionality of annotative dimensions. Okay, starting with our annotate toolbar, we're going to notice that we have multiple commands that allow us to designate sizes and measurements on our drawing, as well as annotate them with text. We're going to start by going to the lower right corner of the dimension ribbon and start with a dimension style that we're going to create ourselves. We're going to call this new dimension style, style 1. We're going to start with the standard dimension style as a basis for the new one. Check that. For annotative, which we'll explain later. Now we're going to change some things. We're going to change some sizes. We're going to change some sizes and some color. We're going to make our dimension lines red, our extension lines red. We're going to make our text red. We're going to change our text height to 0.0625, which will be overridden by the dimension, the text style, which we're going to be using in a second. We're going to create a new text style as well. We're going to call this style style 1 as well, and we're going to select it. We're going to give this a font of, let's go with City Blueprint. I prefer that one. We're going to make it annotative. Specify that later. 0.0625, 0.0625, 16th of an inch. Set current, and it's annotative. We want to save our style changes. Yes, we do. Okay, close that out. We're going to select style 1 as our text style. Now, if you notice, our arrowheads and everything else is kind of large, so we're going to go back to our lines, our symbols, and change our arrow size to 0.0625. We're going to change our extension lines to extend beyond the dimension lines to 0.0625. And we're going to change our center mark of our circles to be 0.125, an eighth of an inch. And what else are we going to do? For now, primary units we're going to change to architectural. Alternate units we're not going to use. Our tolerances are going to stay the same. We're going to keep our precision down to the ½ inch. Other than that, I think that we're set to go. Offset from origin. Offset from origin 0.0625, right. Alright, so we're all set there. We're going to hit OK, set current, hit OK. Now we're going to draw a simple shape. In this case, we're going to draw a polyline. And we're going to draw orthographically. Just some simple basic shapes. Okay, so there you go. Now, selecting style 1 as our dimension style, we have that set up. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing for our leaders. We're going to create a new style and go through this pretty fast. We're going to call it style 1. Continue. We're going to go color red, style straight, leader structure content. We're going to use mtext with our style that we created before, our text style of style 1. We're going to make our text style color red. We're not going to frame the text, horizontal attachment. Middle top line, landing gap, 0.0625. We're going to give our leader landing distance of 0.0625. We're going to give our arrowhead a size of 0.0625. Leader break size, we could probably bring that down to 0.0625 as well. Bring the text closer together. I think that should be good for now. And we're going to hit OK on that. Set current, close. Now, keep in mind, this object is created in model space. It's a polyline. We're going to now dimension this. You look at 1 to 1, meaning for every unit we're going to draw, it's going to be represented by 1 unit. That's going to change, and the reason why we are creating an annotative object is because when we go to plot or print, depending on the size of the object, we're going to try to fit it on a piece of paper. Now, the smallest size piece of paper that I'm aware of is 8.5 by 11. Now, trying to fit a 200-foot building on that is obviously impossible. But scaling that building down to fit on the paper isn't. The only problem with that is, as you scale down something, the text will scale down with it to a point where you can't read it. So the text has to maintain at a certain height that's visible to the naked eye when you're reading a piece of paper, which usually is around, the threshold's around maybe 3/32 of an inch, a 1/16 of an inch. After that, it kind of gets pretty tiny. It can be bigger, but it really can't be much smaller. So we want to make sure that our text always, no matter what we do to our drawing, remains at 0.0625 or 1/16 of an inch. So that's where the annotative dimensioning comes in. For the model space, we're going to leave this at 1:1, and we're going to start drawing our dimensions. Now, if you notice, the overall size of this object is 1'5". So that obviously won't fit on a 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, being that it's 17 inches. So now I'm going to just erase that for a second. I'm going to change our scale down here so that we can see our dimensions a little better as we draw them. Okay, now we're going to go around this drawing, dimensioning this drawing. To get an idea of the functionality of annotative dimensions. Just don't mind me, I'm just going to go regular linear dimensions. There's an auto dimensioning tool that you could use. I don't particularly use it. I do know that I have to set my snap to midpoint, because it is. I'm going to screw this up a little bit. This is a little too far away, but it might be okay when we get down to here. I'm just going to continue this along. Sometimes AutoCAD will put the text outside the dimension line by default, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. In this case it isn't, or at least that case it wasn't. This case it is. So I'm going to try to move that out of there. We'll go to an aligned dimension here. Okay, so now you see that our object is dimensioned. Like I said, its overall size is about 17 inches, I believe. About 17 inches. Now, if I was to draw an 8.5 by 11 inch piece of paper, you'd notice that obviously this wouldn't fit on top. If I draw a shift at 8.5, 11 inches, well, there's your paper. Full size. Now obviously this thing won't fit down unless it's scaled down, which we're not going to do in model space. We're gonna view this. We're going to change our perception of this object without actually changing its size. That's what's going to allow us to print it. Now if we go into layout view 1, you notice there's a viewport in here, which is our window into the model space where we just were. So if I double click in there and zoom extents, you'll find there it is. But if you notice, the dimensions are gone. It's not recognizing them. They are annotative, but they're not at this particular scale. Right now they're only known to be 1:1. If I was zoomed in, made this 1:1, you would see our dimensions, but obviously the thing wouldn't fit on the paper. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some scales to our dimensions. I'm going to go back in model space. I'm going to pick our dimensions. I'm going to add a list of scales. I'm going to add probably all the architectural scales that we're going to use to give this example a little more clarity. So I'm going to add all these. Now these are all able to be viewed at the different scales. So now if I look at this particular drawing, I set the scale to 1/2 inch equals a foot. You know, this is kind of tiny, but the text is there. Let's get it up to 1.5 inches equals a foot. Now it is annotative, so as your scale factor gets higher, your text is going to stay the same size regardless. In this case, 1/16 of an inch. If I scale this drawing down, right now, our perception is that it's 6 inches equals a foot. If I scale it down to 3 inches equals a foot, the dimensions will stay the same size. They'll get larger as the drawing gets smaller, inversely proportional to your scale factor, but they will stay at the same size as the object is perceived to be smaller. If you notice, the text stays the same size, 1/16 of an inch. That's great because now if you have multiple viewports where you're going to be plotting at different scales, different portions of the building might be needed to be shown at different scales or different detail levels, we can now bring this particular viewport and we can make it obviously encompass the whole object so we can see what we're trying to demonstrate here. But now if I copy this down, and change the scale, you'll notice that even though the drawing is perceived to be smaller, the text obviously again will stay at the same size. So now you have two of the same object on one sheet of 8.5 by 11 inch paper, both being representative of about 17 inches, obviously larger than the paper, but being able to be shown at a scale representing its full size where the dimensions are indicative of the size of the object. If I lock these two viewports, I'm going to give you a little more of a demonstration of exactly how this holds true. Now if I decide to change one of these dimensions, if I stretched, let's say this 2 and 3 inch dimension here, if I stretched it a little bit, let me get back in the viewport, if I stretch this, you'll notice that the dimension on the left will get larger, the dimension on the right will get smaller. A lot of these dimensions are being shown at once. So you'll see now this became 3, this became 2. So regardless of the size or your perceived size of the drawing, it will stay full size. It will not have changed. It will not have scaled down. It won't be, if I went 1/2 of an inch, if I went and scaled this down by half, this wouldn't say 2.5, this wouldn't say 1, this wouldn't say 1.5. It would stay the same size, but your perception or your perception of how you're viewing it will get changed. And that's the beauty of this. You can set the scale factor on any viewport at any scale to see whatever level of detail that you need. So I think that's a quick, good overview of the annotative dimension variable that has become part or standard to the AutoCAD suite over the course of the last 10 years. I think it's a great tool. I use it often, and I hope this tutorial was helpful.